And for those of you who don't know, people often think about homeless people as just the crazy guy who is out there being nutty, right? That's what we think of. But that isn't that's a chunk of homeless people. That's true. That is a subsection of them, but there are many homeless people who do not fit that model at all. Some of them are actually families, some are working, many of them are temporarily homeless, and some are different. This is about specifically people who are working and homeless.
Patients who were working at like Walmart or McDonald's or driving for Uber and Lyft, when they finished their shifts, they weren't going to an apartment, they were going to shelters or living with others or sleeping in the very cars they had just done, an airport run in for Uber and Lyft. And so as she told me about that, I was shocked.
Right. Why this is important is people should understand people fall into homelessness for many different reasons. It isn't just because they got it, they became an addict, or that's what people always think. Is that a reason? That is a reason, yes, but that isn't the only reason.
In all of the reading I've done about homelessness, I've never seen this sort of discussed, this phenomenon.
If all the reading you've done, and you've done more than me, you haven't found this out, wow. What are you reading? And I'm not trying to be flippant. What I'm saying is this guy's a journalist, right? So you don't know this about homelessness. I knew, and I'm not a journalist.
Of the working homeless. And so I ended up writing a magazine story for the New Republic about it. And even when that was over, I felt like I had only scratched the surface. Families aren't falling into homelessness. They're really being pushed. This one family, Celeste is the parent's name. Her story begins in this really dramatic way with her rental home burning down.
The system has to change, but the problem I don't like about this narrative at the beginning already is it's almost as if people are pushing them. And if you see the title of this is Housing Hunger Games, Private Equity's War on Workers. Yet they won't speak about that at all. That's utterly just clickbait. I'm not joking. And the reason why I looked at this is because private equity is actually starting to invest less in homes now. They're actually backing away, which is why Kathy Hochul, my governor, has decided that she now is going to stop these private equity people because they've been lowering the amount they've been trying to buy recently because the housing market is starting to collapse.
It wasn't this dramatic house fire that pushed her family into homelessness. It was the fact that months later, after the house burned down, she realized that the private equity firm that owned her home, who was her landlord, had filed an eviction on her on a home that was no longer standing, that was literally uninhabitable. And her credit score was tanked, her credit was destroyed, and that is what forced her and her children into homelessness.
The fact that her house burned down, to me, tells me that if she didn't have insurance or if they weren't helping her out in whatever the case may be, she then had to go live someplace else, and that was too expensive. You don't go into homelessness because your credit is bad. That's not a thing. You go into homelessness because you don't have enough money. I'm not trying to put it down. I'm saying the logic is you're attacking, you're saying it's because your credit's bad. That's not the reason why.
I mean, I'm sure every story is, unique. But what are some of the commonalities throughout the families and the people that you talked to?
Good question.
What are some of the common themes?
Yeah, I mean, each of the 5 families who I followed over several years, to write this book, they all have really singular, really distinctive stories and journeys. But I think what comes through really clearly is the common denominator that the reason so many people are becoming homeless.
The common denominator, the reason why so many people are
in this country is because they don't have access to housing they can afford.
That makes sense. I'm with you. Okay, we got a winner. The reason why they're homeless, most of them, not all, of course, there are issues with people who have addiction problems and mental health issues. Of course, those people exist. But the biggest reason is they don't have access to housing they can afford. I'll buy that. I'll buy that. Okay, that's great. Good. So Kim goes, she needs a lawyer. Correct. It wasn't the credit score that got her, Kim. You know that, right? That's not an issue. Now, Lunatic's right, though. The credit score system is a scam. True. That's accurate. That's true. But also true, Kim, both of you guys, thank you for being members, by the way. Yes, she does need a lawyer, 100%. If she had a lawyer, if that was I don't think that was in New York State. If that's in New York State, she's good. I'm not joking, but we'll get to that in a second.
And, the term working homeless really demands that we confront not just the homeless side of that equation, but the working side as well. These are people who are working and working and working some more. And it's not just that their wages are too low, although there's certainly that as well. It's that the very nature of work has changed for millions of Americans.
The concept of work changing, and sadly, our government will not say it, and too many people still believe it. And they think that inherently an hours is hours of labor matter. Your hourly labor, be very clear on this, is make some of you upset, but you have to understand this. This is not my opinion. This is how it actually works in the world. And the sooner everyone understands this, the better off we'll all be. Your hourly labor has no intrinsic value. It has no specific value just because you worked for an hour. What matters is what is the outcome of that labor. That's what matters to every business owner, to every employer, except for the federal government. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm saying that's true. Now, people who, for example, who are farmers, you get that completely. People who are entrepreneurs get that completely, right? You're a farmer. You've got to fix the fence because the cows are getting out. It doesn't matter if that takes you 1 hour or 4 days. The amount of time you spend on the fence isn't the value you produced. Making the fence so the cows don't escape, that's the value. And be very, very, very clear. Next thing to remember, nobody, one more time, nobody who was wealthy and or powerful in America, in the world, I'm saying America, but in the world, became that way because of their hourly salary. And repeat that. Nobody. There's not one person who said, I'm rich now. Why? Because my hourly rate is high. That's not the reason why they became wealthy. And we as Americans have to get that as soon as possible.
The next, Celeste, that woman who I just talked about, whose house burned down, she was later diagnosed with ovarian and breast cancer. And she was having to choose, do I go to my warehouse job or do I go to my chemo treatment? Because if I miss a shift at work, I don't get paid. And then me and my kids go from being in this squalid extended stay hotel room to being on the street. So
there we go. She is in, that's why she became homeless, because she's in an extended stay hotel. That makes sense. It wasn't the credit score. That at least makes sense. Now we're clear. That's the reason why. I get it.
It's not just wages. It's not just rents. It's that the nature of work and really the nature of housing, a lack of basic tenant rights and tenant protections that has caused homelessness to rise to the highest level.
Utterly made up. The fact that the reason for a rise in homelessness is because of lack of tenant rights? And you might go, Larry, okay, I'm going to give you receipts. This part bothered me. Here are the list of states where the homelessness has gone highest, both recently and also long-term. But here is recently, I'll go long-term also, but here is recent. Highest, Hawaii, DC, New York, Oregon, Vermont, California. All going up. District of Columbia went down. All of them went up. What state has the most friendly, most possible assistance for renters and tenants? New York. Number one. Number two, California. They're top 5 in homelessness. What is one of the best one in homelessness? Texas. Texas is going down. Texas is easiest to build, has the least tenant rights. It is the most landlord-friendly state. I'm not joking. I'll show you data on this. It is the most landlord-friendly state in the union, and homelessness is going down. What he said, there is no evidence of that. Every state that has the least and lowest amount of tenant rights has the least homelessness. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have tenant rights. I'm not saying that. But he said the reason is because a lack of basic tenant rights. That is a lie. That is demonstrably not true. His ideology is coming through. I just showed you data. Of course, there is more. This is New York. How friendly New York is. New York has, I'm not joking, rent control, eviction protections, security deposit caps, an eviction process that allows you to not evict people, landlord responsibilities. Landlords in New York City go to jail. I'm not joking. They go to jail if they don't do the right thing. Anti-harassment laws. So I'm not joking. It's a true story. If you are a landlord and you go to your tenant and they haven't paid for whatever, 2 months, and you say, hey, you need to pay me. Come on. They can call the cops, say you harass them, and the cops will arrest you. If you think I'm making that up, you can do a simple Google search. That's absolutely true. The people who are hurt by all these rules aren't the big guys, they're the little guys. Over 50% in New York City of the landlords are massive landlords. The average landlord in New York City has, I'm not joking, over 20 properties. So what he just said is utterly false. New York State has the most, California, the next most protections for tenants. And both of those, top 5 in homelessness and getting worse. Top 5 in homelessness and getting worse. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm telling you the truth. That is not a real connection. There are other reasons why people are homeless. That's not one of them. That's stuff that he just wants to say big government matters. When you have big government, you literally have more homelessness. Again, literally, I showed you data, more homelessness, not less.